Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Are you looking for an easy and elegant way to make your Christmas gifts extra special this year? In this step-by-step video, I'll show you how to paint these beautiful watercolor gift tags with Christmas botanicals. I've included timestamps so you can jump right to the designs of your choice. You can see I've done several of these tags just with the botanicals on the front, and then you can write your message on the back, or you have the option of making some with the to from, or whatever other message you want to include on the front. Let's go ahead and get started. So for supplies, I've cut up a variety of small pieces of watercolor paper, and for the tags, I've gone ahead, I've got a few sizes here, but if you want something standard, probably something by like say 3.5 by 2 would be good. And once I did that, I went ahead and I drew with a pencil line. Actually, let me just show you how I did it. All right, so this piece is a little bit larger than some of my tags, as you can see here. But what I did to do the little cutoffs at the top, I kind of just made myself a little guideline. So let's go about here, make a little mark, and then you can eyeball the little marks here if you want to measure in like 1/2 inch or something like that. Okay, I'm not very lined up. Not too bad. And then I just drew a little line here. And then I'll just grab my scissors and I'll just cut that off, if you like that look for a tag. And I'll erase the extra pencil thereafter as well. So why don't we start? You know what I'm going to do on these tags is put a little dot where I'm planning to punch the hole as well, just so that I kind of say don't end up drawing where the little hole is going to be. Maybe we should start with some berries. What do you think? Let's just do a small sprig of berries. So I'm going to go ahead in here and just do some berries, maybe a little cluster here, a little cluster here. And I'll just join them together, give them maybe a few small leaves. So for my leaves, you can see I just draw kind of that center vein, and then I just draw the leaf around it. And sometimes you can give the outside of your leaf a few little bumps as you do that, make it a smidgen bit wavy, and that's going to help it look a little bit more realistic. So if you've got the shakes, that's actually kind of good for this. Maybe just throw another leaf right there. All right, why don't we do a few of these, just draw them on here, and then we'll go ahead and paint. So I'm going to do some pine this time. I'm going to do a little bow. Just kind of pretend like I'm not going to do a fancy bow. I'm just going to do a bow kind of like this. Just almost like it's tied with jute or something very fine. And then I'm going to put a few sprigs of the ends of our little pine up here. And then I'm just going to make them come down like this. Probably could just even have 3 sprigs, you know that. 4 is kind of awkward. And then I'm going to put my pine on here. Let's do another one. Maybe we could throw some berries on this one and do a combination of berries and pine. Let's just see how this looks when we go to paint it. I'm just going to go crazy and make a bunch of them and see how they work out. And the ones that I like, I'll use, and the ones I don't like, I can just chuck them. For paints, I'm using Van Gogh watercolor. These are a student grade paint, but because I'm doing simple, fast projects, I think these will work fine. You can absolutely use a professional grade watercolor as well. And I usually just work with my 3 primaries and make my colors from those. And so I've made myself a couple of different greens, a couple of different reds. And here I've got a combination of all 3 of my primaries and made kind of a bluey black, but I'll probably go ahead and mix some more colors up as I go, and depending on what I want to use or work with. Actually, I'm going to want some brown for my branches, so I'll just quickly mix up a brown here using my 3 primaries. So grab some yellow. I always start with my lightest color, then I grab some red, and then finally some blue. And then we'll throw a little more red in. Just kind of go maybe a touch more, just to get it the way I want it here. Maybe a little more blue. If you're interested in knowing how to mix any color using the 3 primaries, let me know. I could do some more videos on color theory and color mixing if that's of interest to you. Even though color mixing can take a little bit of practice, just working with your primaries is the best way to begin to understand color and color theory. And the bonus is that you only need to buy 3 tubes of paint. Now I've got my 2 brushes, one for my brown and one for my green. So I'm going to do just a few of these little brown branches at the beginning. If I want a red bow, I should probably just grab it right now and paint it on there so that I don't have it disappear on me, because once I get those pine needles in, it's going to disappear. I'm already kind of having it disappear, but it's okay. Let's just go like that. And then we can come back in and do a little bit more to it in a minute. So let's go do this one. Let's do the berries. And for the berries, I'm just going to be painting them in and leaving a little area for a highlight, kind of on the upper right. And that red's looking kind of washed out. I'm going to drop a little bit of my deeper, darker red in here. And I'll probably come in here, maybe even with another layer, because I feel like this is kind of watery right now, my paint is. So I'm just going to let that dry, and then I will come back and do the branches. So while we're at it, let's go ahead and do these little berries as well. But I'm going to switch to a stiffer brush. The Simply Simon's brush is actually kind of better for, I find anyways, for round objects. I just find I have more control. And there's nothing wrong with having a less round berry or a little bit less control when you're painting a berry, because this is an organic shape, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but I do find it easier to do round shapes, go figure, with a firmer brush. So I'm just using my firmer brush. And then I'll just jump in there while it's still wet, and on the far left lower side is where I'm dropping this darker color. Guess I didn't mention that super well in my last one. But yeah, just down there is where I want to put my darker shadow. And before I let that dry, I could always come in and quickly do the stems. If I want to do them brown, there's no reason though they have to be brown. They could be green. So it's up to you what color you want to do your little stems. I'll just do that for now. I can always add more later. Okay, so now that these are dry, let's go in there and do our pine. Actually, you know what? I think it might be easier to tip it this way. Let's try this. Let's turn it upside down and paint it this way. So I'm going to start with the tip, and I'm going to come working my way down like so. So the tip is going to be a little bit more going this way, and then as it kind of comes down the branch, I'm going to be branching it a little bit more to the side. I went really wet there. So just dry my brush off a bit. It'll help me be a little bit finer. And just kind of fill in until I get to about there. And I can decide if I want to add more dark green, or even if I want to add a little bit of brown into here. I might just go with the dark green. Let's see. Let's go do this branch over here, and we can come back and decide. Let's add some brown to this one. Maybe a combination of brown and green together. Just picked up a little bit of brown of my brown palette and a little bit of my less minty green, the one that's a little bit more yellowy. Do I like that? I think it's okay. Let's go ahead and do this one. I think I'm going to keep doing it upside down because I think that's easier. And we go a bit heavier with that color in there. Let's see how that's looking. I think that's actually kind of pretty. Do you like that? Just dropping a little extra dark green and letting it kind of bleed around. That's where you can be a little more puddly, is when you're just dropping things at the end, because that paint will kind of just flow more or less. If things are still wet, it'll flow into your nice fine shapes. And if it's not, you can just dry your brush off and guide it a little bit like I'm doing here. All right, let's go to this one. Since I haven't done the brown, I'm going to quickly do that. And then I'll come in here with my green. Why don't we do the same thing? Go this way and do it so that we can get a nice fine tip at the very end of our branch. And I like how that brown is kind of mingling into my green. Just try and paint around these berries. Being a little bit scribbly here. Again, you can be really, really organic, and so you don't have to be too contrived. You can see some of my pine branches. I'm almost going a little bit back and forth. I try to overall keep things swinging kind of outwards, but every now and then I'll take a kind of a swoop or a brush stroke back this way. You can do that. Just be careful that you don't get too many things. Like those branches there were or pine needles rather, starting to get a little flat, and I don't mind the odd one looking a little bit flattened or broken, but you do that too much and it's going to look a little bit weird. So you can do a little bit of that, and that's the beauty of watercolor and the beauty of working with botanicals is you can have a little bit of grace to just add a few extra little less than perfect shapes, and it can look really pretty. So I'm just dropping a tiny bit of brown into this one. I think that's gonna really, yeah, I really like the brown in that one. And I could do that because everything was still wet, and so it just is bleeding around just beautifully. So I'm going to leave it alone now. For these leaves here, I'm going to go ahead and paint them with my dark green, but then I might drop a little bit of red into them. So I'm going to just use the tip of my brush, and I'm using a softer brush for these leaves. The Artegria brush is what I'm using for a softer brush. And I'm just going to come down. So I'm starting with very light pressure to get that fine point, and then I'm kind of pushing heavier on the brush so that I kind of get this nice thick stroke. And I'm trying to be a little careful just because I'm trying to work around these branches and berries. So I'll do the same thing over here. I've got a little less paint on my brush this time. I like it better because I've got a little area where I've left it white, and that I really like that look. So I'm going to try the same thing over here and leave some white behind if I can help it. And then again, I start really light and fine at the tip of the leaf, and then come thick and heavy, and then lighten off again as I come to the bottom. And I've got little puddles happening here in my leaves, and I'm okay with that. I kind of like that look with watercolor, but if you don't, you can kind of soak that up or guide it around. But I'm going to leave it be like that. I kind of like that. So I'm going to come over here. And the other thing is your paper quality will change that too. Arches watercolor paper, if you're using cold press, will behave differently. I'm going to just move my page like this, and again, light at the tip, and then come heavy and then light. And it's super easy to do these leaves if you just basically do them a couple strokes, just changing your pressure. So go from light to heavy and then light again. See that? Super easy. This one is way too dense and dark, and I really don't like it compared to the others. So I'm just going to soak that up with my brush. I'm just like soaking it, dabbing it on my paper towel, soaking it, dabbing on my paper towel. There we go. And I'll just add a little bit of green to these branches. I think I like the green and how that's looking. So I'll just do that quick. I'll need another little branch back there to join these. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that like that. Another evergreen sprig that can be a lot of fun is cedar. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have it come together in a bunch. I will do another bow. I'm just going to go ahead, do a few little branches or whatever, the ends of the little branches up there, and then I'm going to come down with, again, these little stems, but this time I'm going to draw the berries kind of on the stems or lower on the stems, something like this. We will do a group of 3 here, maybe 2 here. I don't know, something like that. Let's just turn it around and see if we're happy with this. Maybe 1 more here. I don't know. And then we're going to come in and do all the little branches around that. So I'm just going to lightly lift that off with my kneadable eraser so they're not too dark. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this color here that I have mixed up. It's kind of a bluey black color, and I'm just going to go ahead and do like the C shape of, almost, if you will, of each of these. This is the shadow of the berries. So I'm just going to come in here, do that really quick, and then I'm going to use a clean damp brush and just kind of blend that out. So let's come over here, and I've got water on my brush, and I'm just kind of almost like fill in the rest of the shape, if you will, with water, but I'm just letting it blend ever so slightly. If it starts to look overdone, I can always grab my paper towel and just lightly lift a little bit out of the light side of the shapes. But I want to get working here fairly quick so that I don't get hard edges, because if I pause too long in this stage, I could get some goofy little things happening here where it's going to keep looking like a C shape rather than blending it in. It's almost doing that here. Okay, I'll grab my deep red and draw this little bow. This is almost looking like purple, but it's kind of a burgundy color. I'm just going to do something like that. So now that this is dry, I'm going to come in and do the actual cedar. So maybe what I'll do really quick is do my same thing and do these little branches. Now I've got some brown on my brush. I've actually got a little bit of green on it still. I didn't wash my brush super well. That's okay. I'm going to come in and do all the cedar now. So for my cedar, I'm going to mostly use my Christmas green, but then over here I've got that kind of bluey black color that I mentioned, and I'm going to mix a bit of that into it as well. So I think I'm going to tip it upside down once again. I think it's just easier to paint them that way. So I'm going to do that and grab my green. You know what? I might even grab, let's see, let's throw a little bit of blue. Ooh, that's deep blue. That's the way phthalo blue is. I'm going to just wash my brush quick. and drop some of that blacky color with it. So I've got kind of this blacky blue up here and more my dark green here. This is really blue still. It doesn't take very much for it to really overpower things. But I'm going to come in here and instead of doing like a branch like with the long stroke, I'm going to just do lots of little dots and kind of join my branches together with little dots. And I'm going to throw a few extra little dots in here. So you can always draw yourself like a little branch like that and then do a little bit of dotty stuff to kind of pull it together. I'm grabbing a bit of the bluey color this time. I'm going to draw this branch lightly. I've got way too much paint on, so I'm just dabbing it off on my paper towel. And then I'll come in here and do these little tiny little leaves. Or foliage, I guess you could call them. They're not really leaves, right, on cedar. Are they needles, though? I don't really know. We're going to call them foliage. Let's just join that there. So I'm really not doing anything fancy. I'm just kind of just doing these little dotting little things. That's so technical. Dotty little things. Let's do a little branch and then I'll dot the little branch and maybe that'll make it more easy to understand what I'm doing. See how I kind of just draw that branch and then just kind of come in and I kind of alternate between my green and my bluey green color to kind of pull this together. So I'm not just using one color. There's no reason you couldn't though. You could just use a dark green. Just kind of filling that up. Okay, I'm getting really wet on my brush. So let's do this branch here and then we'll do the little dotty thing on it. And as you come here, you can imagine maybe there's another branch here or there kind of coming out. And again, I'm just almost like doing these round little scrubby strokes. Let's turn it around. I think we need a little something over here. Actually, it's not bad. Just a little bit of something. Again, instead of nice long strokes, you're just kind of doing short, stubby strokes. Maybe that's the way to think about it. They're short and stubby instead of long. Okay, let's go ahead and just drop a tiny bit of that brown into the top. So I'm just reaching over to my brown here, and I'm just going to let it kind of bleed in a few spots up here. It's kind of already doing that, but I think that's really pretty. I like the way that it's just, I don't know, adding a little bit of something so it's not all just the greens and the blues. And maybe throw a little bit more bluey green in here. Kind of more in the center of this just to kind of give it some depth. And I don't mind going on top of this even if it's partly dry right now because I don't mind if we get a little bit of like blooming or funny shapes happening in this because I think it'll just add to the look of the cedar. Okay, I'm going to call that good for the cedar. Another way you can do your tag is if you want to be able to have the to from right in the middle on the front of the card, you could do something like this. So you'd have to and then make sure you leave yourself space for the name and then from. And then, oh, we need a little spot for our little hole at the top. And then I'm just going to draw a few branches coming around like so. And then I'm going to actually turn these into some curving little pine branches. So I'm just going to go like this. So basically, I'm almost just like curling my, I don't know, almost like making, it's not quite a wreath, but just kind of like curving these branches around in the space that I have to work with. So I'm just doing something like that. And then I'm going to grab my paintbrush and just quickly drop in some brown at the base of these stems. They don't need to be everywhere, but put a little bit of brown on here because that does add a nice touch of color here as well, right? Then I'm going to come in with my green. I'm going to use my darker green, I think. And I'm going to come in and draw some of these little pine needles. Now I'm going to actually start, I think, at the top where I'm going to have some of them kind of almost like a little bit more going straight up and down, if you will. And then I'm going to come more to the side as I come down. And I'm working very lightly with my brush. I don't want to push too hard. You'll get thicker pine needles if you're putting too much pressure on. your page. The other thing that can give you the thick pine needles is if your paintbrush is drowning in paint. So you just need to dry it. So you can just like dab it off like so. That'll help. And then make sure you have a sharp enough or a brush that does come to a tip. If you've got a really dull old brush, it could make it a little more challenging to do these pine needles as well. So just be aware there could be a few factors if you're struggling with your pine. In my experience, most of the time it actually has to do with pressure or wetness, but a lot of the time I think that if you're struggling, it's probably that you're just needing to loosen up a little bit, lighten up a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice to get fine pine needles, so give yourself some grace and just know, yeah, it can take a few passes. So if you want to practice on a little scrap of paper, you can do that. Ooh, that's called too much paint right there. And yeah, just keep practicing. You'll be able to get the hang of it. This one is challenging because it's curling. Let's try this. Let's move my page around. Let's start at the tip. And the other thing is, of course, you could do pine branches that aren't quite so small. That would also probably make it easier. I'm having to use fairly light pressure to get these super tiny little branches. The other thing you could do is use a watercolor pencil. I show how to do that on my video of 7 easy botanicals for winter or Christmas. And yes, a watercolor pencil could make it a lot easier for you if you're really struggling to get fine pine needles. Okay, I really goofed up there. Oh, well, that's okay. I think in a few spots I might even throw a little bit of this kind of blackish blue color in just so that I get some variety, because I feel like things are a little bit boring in some spots. The other color I could add is a little bit more brown, but if I add too much brown, it might start looking like I've got dead pine needles. So to find that fine balance there. I do like the way that brown does add kind of that olive green natural look. Just have to be careful, because if you're like me, it's easy to overdo the brown. Okay, let's come up here. And I'll just speed along here because it's pretty self-explanatory. Let's do some mistletoe, but instead of doing it like a sprig down the center, let's kind of make it come around. And maybe what we'll do is turn the tag this way, put a little dot, and you could write a message. You could do to from, or you could write something else. Like maybe you could write the word peace. That would be pretty. Then I'm going to go ahead and just draw some branches kind of almost wrapping around the word peace. And then I'm going to do some berries, and you could probably just paint these on really almost rather than having to actually pencil them in first. Sometimes I pencil them in just because it helps me know that I'm happy with my placement, but do what you're comfortable with. I'm going to do the mistletoe berries the same way I did my cedar berries. So I will just do these crescent-shaped shadows with my blue-gray color, and then I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and then I'm just going to come in with my damp brush to gently blend these shadows out. Here I've lost my shadows and definition, so I'm using a paper towel to lift or blot just a little bit of the light side of each berry. And then I'm going to repeat this for the rest of these berries. Then I'm going to come in with my green or my greeny blue, and I'm just going to do teardrop shape little leaves. I think I can probably paint them in without having to draw them, but let's see. I'm going to make sure my brush is fairly dry, and I've got some of that kind of minty green on my brush, or the one that's kind of the blue green. It's really my dark green, but as you know, I've got a little bit of blue mixing in here now. So let's just we'll do the branches with the same color, but I'm gonna do teardrop leaves. Ooh, I'm slopping up a bit, but you can see when you've got a lot of leaves, you've got grace here. I'm just gonna do one here. This one's gonna look a little goofy, but I'll try and get a little more staggered as I come along. And I'm just gonna move my paper however I have to kind of get these little leaves in here. I might come back and do all the stems after. I'm going to do a tiny one right there. Then I'll just work my way around the branches. And then finally, I'll just come around and kind of add the little branches in. Why don't we do this taller one, but lay it on its side and write the words Merry Christmas here. And then we can, on the back, you can always do the to from thing, right? So let's just make ourselves our little dot. So we're gonna punch a hole there. I'm gonna write Merry Christmas, and then I'm gonna put some, just do some really loose pine or berries around it. Something like that. It's a little bit sloppy, but I can make it a little bit neater when I go to add some paint. And then what I'll do is just add some loose, simple berries or foliage around it. So maybe I'll add a few berries. Sometimes I do still like drawing it out with a pencil just so that I kind of can figure out what I want or where I want things before I go and add everything to it. Oh, you know what we never did is holly. Let's do some holly. These are going to be really tiny holly. I'm going to go ahead and just show you a big one as well. Okay, just a couple tiny pieces there. So I'll paint in my little berries first and let them dry. Actually, I probably can even come in and do my holly at the same time if I don't let those shapes bleed together too much. So let me just rinse my brush. I'm going to try my softer brush for this and see what I think. So I'm kind of outlining and filling it in at the same time. You know what? I might make another little swoop here because something's a little bit goofy looking to me. I think I kind of messed up while I was painting that. Let's just go like that. And then I'll just fill it in. I'm just going to soak some of the paint out of this one because it's a little bit puddly. I'm just going to soak it up and use it to paint this one over here. And you can see the red from my berries, because I'm allowing them to touch a little bit, it is bleeding in to my holly shape, which is fine if you're okay with that. Just be aware that that can happen. I think it's pretty, but you may or may not like that look, so just be aware. Let's let that one just dry. Let's do some holly that's just a little bit bigger so you can see how to do this. And what I'm going to do with this tag is write to and from over here, and then I'll do the holly over here. Actually, let's do the holly first, then we'll figure out how the to from fits. Okay, so for the holly branches, you know what, this one's a little goofy looking. I'm just going to draw it maybe more like that. Okay, so for the holly, I'm going to tip my page as I draw this so that I can do these little veins coming off. I was calling them branches, but it's kind of more a center vein is really what it is. And then when I've got that shape there, I'm going to just do these little swoops to join them. So swoop, swoop, and maybe I'll just do a couple little veins right here. Let's just do a couple little veins kind of right there and just kind of bring it in. Okay, let's tip it upside down to do these easier. I'm going to come a little bit wider on this one and swoop, swoop, and maybe one there and then something there. Is that working? Yeah. Okay, one more. I'm going to get a little bit narrower towards the top, and I might just put one more. Well, let's see how it looks after I do these ones, if I need to add something at the base. Sort of like so. Maybe we'll do something, just bring it down a little ways, like so. I don't know, this one's a little bit of a challenge. Maybe something like that. I find holly a hard thing to do. Anyway, so I'm going to do something like leave room for the to from here. So I'll go to and then from. And then there'll be room for name down here as well. Hopefully that's enough space. If you want to, you could always make a wider tag for this or just shrink this. Let's shrink this holly a little bit just so you have room, because not every name is short. If you're going to write like mom, you could fit that word in there. Okay, that's better. All right, so let's just dab this off a little bit before we paint it, because we really drew quite dark there. And you know the drill for these berries. We're going to just fill them in. Ooh, I almost lost the highlight on that one. I'm very much too wet here on my brush. I'm letting these berries kind of fuse together as I paint them. I can always separate them if I want to with shadows later. I don't like how little highlight I have on this front one, but it's okay. I'm just going to draw with my paintbrush here, make it just a smidgen bit bigger. Then I'm going to come in with my brighter Christmas green and just paint these hollies. So I'm going to just kind of outline them. And then I'm going to try and leave some of the veins kind of like white. Try your best. You don't have to do it to every vein. It'll actually look funny if you leave every vein white, but just leave some of them white. And that's going to help define the shape of this. Okay, that's a little bit goofed up on the side of this one here. I'm not quite sure. I painted it a little bit weird, I guess. Just close it up a little bit. If you've got too much white, you can always reduce. It's easier to paint into your white shapes than it is to try and lift things. You can always just create the veins later too with a pencil or like a watercolor pencil, or even just a little more paint. But I'm just going to drop a little bit of this bluey color here that I used on my cedar. Just drop that in there. It's bleeding, almost bleeding into that berry. We'll try and be careful. Okay, I'm going to move this to the side so it's easier to paint it. Do these swoops. This little one, I'm not going to worry as much about maintaining this, all the little veins. Maybe I'll just maintain a little bit of the center vein. Just a little bit of it. And fill that up with green. Drop a little of the bluey color. Again, we'll do it closer to the base. Just a second. Lost some of my shape. Sorry. I didn't follow my lines. There we go. That's a little bit better, isn't it? Okay. Once again, trying to leave some of my whites, and then you can see I fill some of them in just based on how many it feels like I actually want to leave there. Then I'll come in with some of this blue, just drop a little bit of it in there. Maybe now that the red is drying a little bit, I will throw a tiny bit of the deep dark red that I have here into the shadow side of these berries. Now, parts of them are like dry and parts are still kind of wet, so it's going to bleed a little different on each of them, but I think I'm okay with that. Just move along. For the poinsettia, I want to keep things really nice and simple here. I'm going to just go ahead, draw a few little balls or circles in the center here, and then I'm going to come around the whole poinsettia and do these kind of guidelines for myself. They kind of look like this. So instead of just being like a perfect star where everything is pointing straight up at the top and everything, these back ones are kind of curved a little bit, like they're falling over, if that makes sense. Then I'm going to turn each of these into a petal. That's the center of the petal. So I'm doing it the same way kind of that I draw a leaf, right? I usually draw the center vein and then just draw around it. And that's what I'm doing with the poinsettia, except that I'm doing it kind of in a circle. And now this one back here is almost disappeared, but do we like that? Probably get rid of that vein shape because it's kind of awkward. Maybe just do something like that. That back one is just kind of hiding on us. All right, and then if we want to add a few bigger leaves for the poinsettia, we could just something like that. These are actually leaves. These are going to be green. Okay, and we'll put our little tag there. You even would have room if you wanted to do a really tiny to from. You could do that on your poinsettia. You just have to make them small, and then we're going to go ahead and quickly paint them. We're going to use our red. Let's just turn my palette here. And I'm using my soft brush, the same one I like for my leaves, which is an Artegria. And this is a number 6 round, but you could even use smaller because we're going to go really tiny here. Actually, before I add paint, I'm just going to dab some of the pencil off with my kneadable eraser because it is really, really dark and we don't want to have our pencil quite so bold. So let's go ahead and paint this front petal first. And to do that, I'm going to kind of come in here and I'm going to give it heavier pressure. Okay, I went light at the beginning, heavy, and then I'm going to lighten off. I'm going to do the same thing to this side of this, same way we did the leaves, and lighten off, and then we can just close that in just the amount we want. And then what I'm going to do with the leaf beside it, or the petal beside it, sorry, is that I'm going to probably leave a little white gap between them. So I'll show you what I mean in a sec. So again, you can see I'm varying my pressure, just kind of going heavy and light. So just the tip of it, you want to go light. And then I'm going to fill in this gap here without touching the petal beside it. That's a simple way to do a poinsettia, so you don't have to like let it dry between layers, or between petals rather. So I'm going to just come in again, losing some of my whites here, but that's okay. I want to just keep the petals more or less separated from each other. That's my main goal. let's go ahead and do this one. Try and keep that vein on this one because it's a bigger petal. I think the back ones don't matter quite as much. Again, I'm just filling it in, but changing the pressure on my brush so that I use heavy pressure when I'm doing thicker sections and light pressure when I want to do the tip of each of these. Slopped on that one a little bit, but that's okay. It wasn't bad. It just kind of went out of my line for myself, but that's okay. You can see it still worked. And there's our poinsettia. And when it's a little bit drier, I could probably come into the center right away here. You know what? I'm going to do the leaves first, and then I'll come into the center. So I'm going to use my same brush, but I'm going to grab my dark green and do the same thing, but I'm going to be really careful that I don't, maybe a bit of light green. I'm going to have to be very careful that I don't touch my poinsettia unless I'm okay with the bleeding happening. So you can let it dry between doing the red and the green if you don't want to have any chance of it bleeding. If you're okay with that look, sometimes it's really, really pretty to have a little bit of that green and red together. You can actually make them touch on purpose. I might just drop some red into my leaf after rather than, ooh, I touched there. I was going to say rather than accidentally touching them, but I did. So that's okay. I'm still gonna drop a little bit of that color in because I think the way that the red and green mix very gently is pretty. So, but it happened already there, so I don't know if I even need to have it happen again. Should I? I could add a little teeny weeny little bit of red there if I want to, just so you can see how you can add it if you want to. Just go drop, drop. And there you have a little bit more red in your leaves. All right, and I'm going to go ahead with my brown to do the center, but I'm going to use a little bit of my brown, a little bit of yellow, and I'm just going to make like a really kind of a gold color and just drop it into the center here. Ooh, that's almost looking green, isn't it? Just put a little bit more yellow on my brush. There we go. That's a better color. You can see a little bit of bleeding happening between the red and the yellowy gold color, but I think I'm okay with that. I'm just going to go in here quick and do my lettering on all of my little tags. And then I'm just going to go ahead and punch holes in my tags. Then you could grab yourself a black pen and write the to from. And then on the ones that we haven't done that on the front, I'm going to do that to the back. But of course, that's totally optional. Maybe you have another message that you want to write on the back. That brings us to the end of our gift tags, but stay tuned because we're going to be taking some of these concepts and putting them into handmade cards. And I'm going to show you how you can layer those cards with pieces of cardstock to make some stunningly elegant Christmas cards for this season. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, that these tags will enhance your Christmas celebration, and that you've been inspired to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!